I'm a native of Hammond, which is very close to Maryville. I've been to Rita Road many times, and actually know a different story of the road. The ones I saw on your site are new to me. My parents told me the story long ago, and although I've not experienced it for myself, I know others who claim to have. This may be more of a local story, but who knows? It's still something I'd like to share. Back in the 1950s, the road was often used by teens and young adults as a private makeout place. The story goes that a young lady and her boyfriend made a stop at the road. While they were parked, they heard a thumping on top of the car. They ignored it for a bit, but the girl started to become creeped out as the noise grew louder. The boyfriend decided he would get out and investigate. When he got out, the thumping stopped. After several minutes, the boyfriend had not returned, and the thumping started again. The girl panicked and got out of the car. She found her boyfriend bloodied and hung from a tree, and the thumping she was hearing was the sound of her boyfriend's feet hitting the top of the car as he hung there dead. Supposedly on warm summer nights, if you pull off into the road and park for a bit, you will hear the thumping, and if you get out to investigate, the thumping will stop, and you will find a letterman's jacket hanging from the tree above you. There is also an abandoned school out in Cedar Lake, where Hammond Baptists used to attend. The story goes the pastor went crazy and removed some of the little ones from this world, if you know what I mean. I've personally have experienced strange happenings in the school, such as children's voices, windows that were shut on the way in open as we walked back out. Supposedly it's supposed to be the little ones trying to escape. From what I understand, a few years ago, part of the building caught fire inexplicably. I haven't been there in about 5 years. However, if you would like some directions to the place, it's a little tricky to get to, and I would be happy to share them with you if you are interested. Like I said, this is a story passed on to me by my parents, and others I know also know the story and claim to have witnessed it. I'm also aware of the satanic gatherings in the field, down the trail in the woods, usually occurring during the 2 equinoxes every year. This may explain some of the animal parts we found. Also, in this field, I've seen glowing orbs here and there, but never thought much of them since they were out far in the field. But you may be able to look into this more than I can. Oh, and the girl that jumped into the river and drowned, she is also part of this story, in Hammond, of course. She can be seen on Halloween night on Pine Avenue, hitchhiking to get to her wedding. Supposedly, if you pick her up, she thanks you for the ride, and then disappears into the night. My name is Gemma. I went to a primary school in a small village where I lived for a year or 2. Then we had to move into a town nearby. It wasn't too far away from my friends, so sometimes I would catch the bus there. One day, I went up to see my friend Holly. She told me that my old deputy head teacher had just died. I don't know how old he was, but apparently he got murdered. That night, Holly asked me to stay at her house for the night, so I did. We were only about 10 at the time. Her parents were downstairs, and her 2 little brothers were both asleep. We were the only people awake upstairs. Holly went downstairs to get something to eat for me and her, and left me alone. I decided to play a trick on her. I turned all the lights off and hid under her bed in her room. I looked around. I was really scared, so I looked up and saw two eyes looking at me. They were glowing. At that point, I closed my eyes, thinking it was just my imagination. When I opened my eyes, they were still there. I stayed under the bed because I didn't want to move. Then, I heard Holly coming up the stairs. The eyes backed away into the darkness, and I backed away and hid again. When Holly came into the room, I jumped out and scared her. I told her about the eyes, and she believed me. Then she said, "Let's take a look inside the wardrobe." So we both opened it slowly and took a look inside. Funny enough, nothing was in there except for our clothes and stuff. So we both decided that it was me seeing things because it was dark. Later that night, Holly turned the lights off, and we both went to sleep. I couldn't get to sleep, and I kept on looking over at the wardrobe. I laid there with my eyes open, when suddenly I saw the eyes again, looking over at me. I slid under my covers. When I looked out, they had gone, but I could feel something in the room. I knew something was there. Suddenly, a black figure appeared in front of me. It laid down, and then I saw the eyes. It was staring right at me. I screamed, which woke Holly up, and she suddenly backed away against the wall. We could both see the black figure on the floor. Then it seemed to sink into the ground and disappear. We both went downstairs and stayed there for a couple of hours. We talked about the figure for ages. Then I said it reminded me of something. Holly said that as well, before we both realized that it looked like Mr. Baker. Why would he haunt us though? We'll never know. When I was younger, I had quite a few paranormal experiences, as did my mom. The most direct contact either of us had with spirits was with her father. He died at home and lived with us when I was about 4. My mom was very close to him, and I was pretty close to him too for being so young. After he died, my mom would often be house cleaning and walk into his room where his old recliner sat and smell his unique scent, cigarette smoke mixed with cologne and whatnot. She never saw or heard him, but she would know he was there and would talk to him for a while. When I was 6, we moved out of the house he died in and into the house where my mom still lives. I never had the type of encounters my mom had with them, but I was lucky enough to see him once. First, I need to explain the setup of our house. The front and back doors are directly parallel to each other, and both have glass panes in them. The front door opens into the dining room, and you can walk straight through to the kitchen, and then to the back door. You can look from the front porch all the way into the backyard through the glass in these doors. When I was about 7, I was standing in the kitchen, looking out the window of the back door, and I could see the reflection of the front door in the glass. Suddenly, I saw my grandfather walk by the front door in the reflection, as though he was walking across the front porch. He smiled and waved at me. The whole thing only lasted a split second, but he was very deliberately contacting me. I believe he chose to do it in such an indirect way, so as to not frighten me. Maybe he was saying goodbye, since I was too young to understand when he actually died. What's really strange, though, is that I described him to my mom as looking younger than he did when he died. And when she showed me some pictures of him in his 40s, I told her that that's exactly how he appeared to me. She thinks he must have been happiest during that time of his life, and so chose to appear that way. I think it was a couple years after that when my mom had her final encounter with him. She was house cleaning again, when she smelled his familiar odor. She was in a hurry, and she told him, "I'm sorry, Dad. I can't really talk right now," and left the room. When she came back in, the scent was gone, and she just knew that was the last time she would hear from him. She feels guilty that she didn't stop to talk to him, but I think she just realized that she was ready to move on, and that's why he didn't contact her again. We do believe that he stuck around for a while after that, because he would often lose a piece of jewelry or something small, only to have it turn up right under our noses a few days later. I've had other experiences unrelated to my grandfather, but his was the only human spirit I ever actually saw. Not long after we moved into the new home, I had several experiences with feline spirits. I once saw the hind legs and tail of a cat disappearing into, not up, the top of the stairs from the landing. I know it couldn't have been our own cat, because it was pure white, and our two cats were black. Another time, I was sitting at the kitchen table when I felt a cat rubbing against my legs. I reached down to pet it, but nothing was there, and when I looked under the table, there was no cat to be found. There were also a few incidents in my mom's house where electronics would do seemingly things on their own. The TV turned itself off at least twice that I can remember. Perhaps the weirdest instance was when I was in my bedroom listening to my stereo. It has one of those LED screens that flashes at things as music plays, and when you turn the volume knob, these bars show up on the screen that move up or down as you change the volume. I was listening to music one day, and I had my back to the stereo. When I realized the volume was getting lower, I turned around, and the volume display came up on the screen, and the bars were going down like the knob was being turned. I turned the volume back up, and nothing else happened after that. This has gotten long, but I only have one more experience to share. At another sleepover with my best friend, we decided to leave a tape recorder with a blank tape in an empty room while we hung out in the living room and record whatever there was to hear. No one went in the room while I was recording, and the door was shut. When we played it back, we could very faintly hear ourselves in the living room for most of the tape, and nothing else. But there was one spot on the tape where a high-pitched voice spoke in a loud, raspy whisper. It was obviously neither of us, because you could hear us in the background very softly behind it. We weren't sure what it said, but it sounded like "shine a light." It didn't make any sense, but it did creep us out. That was the only unexplained voice on the tape, which unfortunately I no longer have. That was the last experience I had that I'm certain had no physical explanation. This is a story about ghosts that I think is worth sharing. It's a little bizarre and not very detailed, but I think it would capture your interest. When I was young, I always heard ghost stories revolving around these redcoat ghosts. These were entities that would often appear in our house. The home I lived in used to house British soldiers from Napoleon's time, so essentially the late 1700s. I remember one particular incident. It was late at night, and that's when I started to hear strange noises in my room. At first I brushed them off, not thinking anything of it, because you can always explain these incidents away as nothing more than just normal noises. Then, I started to hear noises which were very peculiar. I would hear faded whispers, like a group of people whispering when I would open my door to investigate the sound. It wasn't anything loud, and didn't last for too long. Of course, I ended up going down that staircase to find a root cause of these whispers. What I saw next was actually quite interesting to me. Not scary, although a bit unbelievable. After going downstairs and into the living room, I saw two redcoat soldiers for a second, just standing side by side as they quickly faded from the living room. They also had a foggy and faded quality to them to begin with, where you could barely tell a figure was there with the red colors. I'll never forget that moment the rest of my life. Growing up in Lakeland, Florida, my parents purchased a repossessed mobile home. One of the bedroom doors had a deadbolt lock, but face so the child in the room could not get out. My elder sister had this room and reported a small girl about the age of 5 or 6 that would appear in a white nightgown carrying a teddy bear. She would sit at the end of my sister's bed and just cry. In the closet of the bedroom in the same home, there were stickers and drawings on the wall where it appeared someone was punished and made to sit in the closet. There were also fingernail scratches on the wall in the same closet. In the third children's room of the same home, there was brown carpeting with a lime green shape on the floor that was the same shape of a clothes iron. If an iron fell onto carpeting while it was hot, doesn't it make sense it would just burn the carpet hair instead of change the color to green? My aunt even had to come remove a spirit once that was following my little sister all the way to school and hiding behind things when she turned around to see who was following her. My little sister said it resembled a Grim Reaper type of shadow. In the same home, items would mysteriously be moved to another area. Things would then come up missing, then all of a sudden reappear one day. I truly believe that we are not living alone on this earth, and that spirits live among us. There are a lot of theories as to why this is, but to me, I believe that ghosts and spirits are almost other living forms trapped in another dimension. Even if we have loved ones who have passed and appeared to us, to me, it's like they are leaving this realm of existence to enter another one. And they behave much like we all do, often unaware of the world they just left. I believe that the ones that chose to bridge the gap between our world and theirs are messengers chosen by God to give us confirmation that we as human beings will not lose purpose once we have left this earth, and that our souls do live on. Even if you aren't a religious type, I do believe that if ghosts exist, then God must exist in some form. Otherwise, how do these souls still live on? And what power is allowing them to exist in the other universe? Anyway, my ghost experience comes at the time I was staying at my grandmother's. It was night, and I was 11 years old. I was watching TV in the living room when I heard what sounded like my grandfather, who was a heavy-set man, but tall, make his way through the home. Noticeable footsteps, as if he were wearing boots, and they were walking across the hardwood floor. At the time, I immediately recognized it was probably my deceased grandpa, so I yelled out to Grandpa Bunky, "Please stop scaring me." I was hoping I would get confirmation of him leaving me alone, because I'm a very anxious person, and even though I'm in tune with spirits, sometimes I just don't want to deal with it. I don't think my grandpa honestly meant any harm by it, but I think he felt that he wasn't getting enough attention, if that makes sense, and wanted his presence to really be known that day. He was always known as a loud, boisterous person in life, the kind of man that had to be the center of attention. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I could have swore I saw the shadow of my grandfather materialize. As soon as I got up to turn directly to where he was gone and faded. So I rushed downstairs to where my grandma was. I really wanted to make sure that nobody else was upstairs, so I just asked Grandma if she was just up the stairs in the hall. She emphatically said no, and asked me why I was so concerned. I told her that I saw Grandpa, and she said that Grandpa is gone, and that while you may miss him, we have to accept this. She didn't believe in the afterlife. Funny thing was, about a year before this all happened, my great-uncle died of a disease in his lungs and kidneys. This was the exact same disease that my grandpa had died from. While that's not unusual, my older sister told me she witnessed the exact same thing that happened to me. One night, when I was at a friend's house sleeping over, she was about 17 at the time. So, I'm not entirely sure if it was my grandpa or great uncle exactly, but I still think my grandpa was the one to visit because he knew me better than my great uncle did. I also think that it had to be my grandpa because maybe he wanted my grandma to believe, but since she is closed off to this world because of her views, he was frustrated. Maybe he gave her signs and she ignored them. Are frustrated ghosts a thing? Anyway, hope you enjoyed my story. I have a crazy story to tell. I live in New Orleans. That's of course located in Louisiana, the deep south. One night, me and my girlfriend were at home, and I'm guessing it was around 5:30 in the morning. I'm assuming, because that's when I got up to go to work, and I always sit by the window and wait for my ride. This morning was a bit unusual and different. I was sitting there, and all of a sudden, I felt this overwhelming chill brush past me, like an undeniable cold air. I asked my girlfriend if she was cold, and she said no. I don't know what it was, but something told me to tell her to sit in my chair to see if she felt what I was describing. It was a lingering cold that didn't go away, and told me she could feel the cold chill as well. It gave us both goosebumps, and within a few moments, the coldness quickly disappeared. The crazy part is, I think the chair is haunted. It was given to me as a present from generations in the family. I'm talking an early 1900s style rocking chair. I remember one of my uncles wanted to just sell it off eBay to get rid of it, because he didn't want anything to do with it. So I ended up taking it off his hands because of the family history. The most interesting part of this chair is, a lot of my family members have claimed to see a black figure in that chair rocking back and forth on numerous occasions. At times, it would be seen rocking on its own without anything being seen. I still have yet to witness anything like this, but ironically, a friend staying over our house actually did. It was later that night, and my girlfriend and I were in a separate room. Suddenly, my friend screams for us to come in because he just saw the rocking chair move on its own without any force. He didn't even know about the history of that chair and our family, so that made it even more terrifying, but intriguing in a way. My dad had stayed in our house once, and he said looking out the window, there's a tree outside our home, and late at night, he saw a faded man in overalls walk behind the tree and suddenly disappear. Again, none of these things have personally happened to me, but they seem to be happening to my family and friends. None of them are capable of lying. I don't see why anyone would anyway, since we're all older, mature adults, and we have no business lying for attention or any purpose really. Now, just because I said I didn't experience anything, besides the coldness in the chair, it doesn't mean my girlfriend hasn't. She told me one day when she was out on the front porch, where you could see the tree. It was evening. It was getting pretty dark, but not so dark you couldn't see anything. She too thought she saw a very dark shadow move around the tree and then disappear. She said it was the weirdest thing because it was like a fog, and you could easily see the contrast between the tree and this mysterious fog. I don't know if you've seen these type of videos before on YouTube where they show this type of stuff, but she said it was very similar to that. She's also seen the blinds from the window where the chair is positioned move from time to time without any explanation. Knocks on the walls, and sometimes her name is whispered into her ear. Again, these are her experiences, so I can't tell you if it's real based on what she said. But again, my girlfriend wouldn't lie to me for no reason. As you know, New Orleans is a city with lots of history dating back hundreds of years, and with our old home, there's bound to be some entity, especially with the haunted chair. Do you believe in this? Because honestly, as crazy it may seem, I do, even without having these experiences for my own to share. As an open-minded person, I'm not just going to hate on someone just because they have a ghost story to tell. I'll be open-minded. I'll consider their credibility and other things. If all those aspects of their personality check out, then yes, I'll have to believe them. This world is fascinating. It has a lot of mystery. I will not just ignore the spirit world. I just wish that I could experience it too, just once, what everyone else has as well. I used to live in the Theta Chi fraternity house as a brother. There were stories talking about the house had a fire in the attic and whole sorts of supernatural and paranormal happenings. I can confirm the fire in the attic was true, and strange things did happen too. Some even reported glowing eyes in the dark of the attic. However, one of the most common had to do with the lights. We had sensors installed to cut back on the brothers leaving the lights on. These sensors only react to the movement. These lights would go on and off all the time when nobody would be in the room. We would be several rooms away, far enough from the sensors that we wouldn't set them off, and they would suddenly go on and off. Also, there were times when we would be sleeping, and we would wake up to what sounded like a large social gathering downstairs. Several of us would go down there, thinking it was a group of brothers coming home from the bar, only to find the entire house empty, and no one would be around. Also, I used to work at Have a Nice Day Cafe, and the upstairs was indeed haunted. I would have to go up there every night to take down a banner that was thrown over the exterior of the building. To do this, I would have to go to the roof via the upstairs. It is full of rooms, completely empty. There was this long hallway that stretched the length of the building. There was only one light that sat at the end of the hallway. As you walked down the hall, you would get the feeling that you were being watched. Several bouncers have claimed to see a man up there, Apparently, before it was Have a Nice Day Cafe, it was called Industry, and one night, a barback intentionally left the world upstairs, using a broken beer bottle, and when the bouncers would make their rounds before closing, they would have to go up there to make sure no one snuck up there. When they would flash their flashlights into the room in which the sad incident took place, the man ghost was seen crying and bleeding. He would get up and run towards you, as if asking for help. Many bouncers quit after they experienced it. I guess you could say they bounced after they saw that ghost. This is a true story of our family's experience at Theodore's Bridge in Wichita, Kansas. I grew up in Sagwitch, Kansas, a small town just north of the bridge's location. Since my family is American Indian, we always respected the legend and tales of the bridge. On May 12th, 1983, my own mother was killed in a car wreck within feet of the old bridge. The police couldn't explain what caused her to swerve sharply to the left. However, they agree that something must have been in the road right in front of her. What's odd is that no animal tracks were ever found, and it wasn't another car. I was young at the time, and awoke around midnight with a horrible dream. It had to do with being grossly removed from this life. Someone had chopped my head off with an axe. Later that morning, around 4:45 a.m., I was awakened again by someone pounding on my door. It was the police looking for me. Turns out, they found my driver's license in my mom's car. Thinking it was me who died, they came to inform my parents only to find me standing in the doorway. Several years later, I was helping my dad go through some papers and found my mom's death certificate. Only then did I find out that Mom was thrown through the windshield with her head coming right off. Throughout the years, as family members and friends have drove by, the sight strange things have happened to them. Their cars would quit working for just a few moments, or they see things, like my mom standing there, looking at them and smiling. If anyone would like to email me, I'd be more than happy to talk to you about all the strange things I've occasionally seen. My name is Catherine. After the experiences me and my family have had, I know we have a ghost. It all started when I was 7. I couldn't get to sleep. I looked down from my bunk bed for a moment or two and saw, in my bedroom closet, which had no door, what seemed to be a little girl sitting in there, staring at me. She wore a white dress and was underneath either a white blanket or a duvet cover. Once me, my mom and my sister were watching a film in the dark, and suddenly, on the shelf, my picture was slammed down. One time my sister had said that she had seen the ghost. One night when we had our normal beds, she saw her walk from the closet to the end of the bed and just staring at her. Then she flew through the wall. The second time I saw her was when I was out in the kitchen. I saw her out the window, in the shed window, smiling, but there would be 2 faces beside her this time. The scariest experience I've ever encountered was when I was watching TV. I was sitting down on one of the seats when I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. I got scared and turned off the TV to ask who was there. Then the door creaked open. Then there was a noise in the other seat, like someone was sitting down on it. I was so scared that I couldn't even move. Nothing else happened since then, but I know our house is haunted for sure. The girl just won't go away. Hi, my name is Kim. I'm 18 years old, and I have a few experiences I would like to share with you. Every summer, I used to go to my Nana's farm and help out. The last time I went was a few years ago. That was when I was 14, and something creepy happened that I've since tried to forget. I think it's about time I shared it with you all. It was a boiling hot July afternoon, and I was helping to clean out one of the barns. My Nana went on and on for about an hour, complaining that it was too hot for her liking, but I decided to stay to try and finish. About 10 minutes after my Nana left, I began to hear tiny pitter-patter of the feet in the hayloft. Thinking that it was just mice or something, I got on with my work. I began sweeping when I heard laughter and two voices, one of a boy and the other of a girl, talking in hushed whispers. I peered up the stairs, feeling slightly scared, and called again, but nobody replied. As I turned to get back to my work, the voice of the girl called up here. I was quite spooked. Nobody should be up here, but yet, there I was, hearing a voice. Sometimes, though, the other kids in the village muck around, so maybe I thought it was one of them. "Hey, you're not allowed up there," I shouted as I walked up the stairs. As I got up to the hayloft, I looked up to see two black shadows with hooks through their necks, almost hanging for a split second. This faded quickly. I completely freaked out and ran screaming to my Nana's house. My Nana later told me that two little people had died in that barn when they were playing around. My mom came to pick me up the next day, and as we drove away, I looked back at the barn and saw two little faces staring right back at me from the hayloft window. Needless to say, I never went back. In 1998, I had a ghost experience. My first, and I hope my last. I was living in the second floor of a college dormitory. My colleague that lived directly under me would ask me on occasion if I was moving furniture late in the night and early morning, between 12 midnight and 2 a.m. Absolutely not. I can recall that I moved my bed once in the middle of the day when I first moved in at the beginning of the semester. I thought maybe it was a ghost because it was common knowledge that our dormitory was an old TB hospital. The entire campus was located on an old military hospital site. Our cafeteria was where the morgue was, back in the Great First Conflict, or the Great Second Conflict. I never heard anything in my room. Then, early one Saturday morning, I got up and made myself coffee and left the dormitory on the second floor and headed down the old iron stairs. I made my way across the tennis courts to make a phone call. I could see my dormitory from where I stood. I dialed the number and was talking to a friend steadily watching the stairs to my dorm. That is, when I saw a smoky black figure flailing its arms around and staring straight at me. Then it went back into the locked closed doors of the second floor dorm. They lock behind each person that leaves, so I reported it to staff. That is when I started to hear many ghost stories from the Knights Guardsmen that patrolled the cafeteria and hallways. There are many dorm buildings on campus. Anyhow, I put it behind me and continued my life. Shortly after my brother died, due to a long illness, I returned to college, but got my own apartment and shared it with a friend. It would get so cold in there. Heat turned on all the way up and the fireplace on, yet it was 70 degrees outside. I was still grieving, so I withdrew from college and took my truck on a long drive across the country in Nebraska while at a rest stop. My entire truck swarmed with flies. I'm very clean, and so wasn't my truck. I was eating, but still swarms of flies. I threw my food away and drove crying and screaming, trying to get them out of my truck. I stopped to wash my truck, then got a motel and shower. I returned 6 months later to my old apartment to ask around to see if the new renters had any problem. The lady that opened the door was really nice and said that she had to hire someone from another state to come and clear the ghost. She said that it was so bad that the person they hired had to have a partner come and help. She mentioned the freezing cold room temperatures, the feelings that someone was following her up the stairs, like I had. They said they do a certain ceremony and burn certain herbs to clear away the spirit, because she didn't mind her ghost clearing work, but it was too much for her. She said that the people she hired said that the bowl they used to burn herbs caught fire. The flames reached the ceiling. It was the worst ghost cleansing they had to do in a long time. Then the lady did a ceremony over me, and the feeling that something hanging on my back just went away. Actually, I felt whatever it was kind of crawl up and out of me and move my spine involuntarily. I've never had a problem since. Maple Castle, located in Ayrshire, Scotland, was built many hundreds of years ago and is reputed to have its fair share of ghosts. There have been many sightings over the years, one of which may be the young lady Jane, who had been imprisoned in the turret for falling in love with a gypsy. I recently have been invited to participate in a sponsored ghost watch at the castle, but chickened out at the last minute due to a recent visit by a ghost expert who reported the presence of at least 3 ghosts, one of which was a crying child who had been tortured and tied in the basement. There is regular paranormal activity reported, as the castle is still being used as offices. Anyway, I'm sort of 2 minds about losing my nerve, as the ghost watch had proved eventful. Crying had been heard from the basement. When the team left at 4 a.m., they made sure all the lights had been turned off. But in the car park, they looked back, and all the lights had been turned back on. When the cleaner came in the morning, the energy-conscious ghosts had turned them off again. Of course, such paranormal happenings are not rare in Scotland. I can quote hundreds from friends and family. These are just a few. My sister and husband walked into a bookshop housed in a very old building, with a book shot straight off of one shelf, one after the other. My youngest sister lived for years in a haunted house, possibly the spirit of a young child. There were occasional temper tantrums. This is a tragic but true tale. My youngest sister and her then boyfriend George had friends over for the evening. Of course, the talk turned to ghost stories in general, when suddenly, the door of the sitting room flew open with such force, it crashed against the arm of the sofa and slammed shut again. George jumped up and pulled open the door, but nobody was there. Everyone was shaken by the violence of the event. Later it was learned that at that precise moment in time, George's cousin and his friend had drowned in the River Irvine after a night of drinking and hijinks that went badly wrong. I remember reading about the drowning of these men in the local paper at the time, but did not learn of the connection to my sister's boyfriend until later. A friend heard the voice via baby monitor, which urged the baby to come. It was hard to be distinguished from the low guttural tone, whether it was male or female. When they went to investigate, no one was in the room besides the baby. My name is Trisha, and I'm writing about one of the many few ghost experiences I've had in my life. I'm fortunate to have found this site to talk to many of those who have experiences with the supernatural. I moved to Bemis Point, New York from Woodbridge, Virginia on May 1st, 2004, into a house which, as to this date, I still call my dream home, because all my life, I always wanted to live in a home so big and so beautiful. This house had 5 bedrooms, 1 bath, a basement, and a beautiful yard. I want to explain why I've chosen to talk about this particular experience in this home in Bemis Point, New York. Of course, I wasn't the only person living in a 5-bedroom home. It was me, my fiance, and my 4-year-old son. My fiance's brother and father were going to live with us. However, that didn't really work out, so it was just the 3 of us for a while. Before we all actually moved into the home, my fiance and my father went to the house to drop off some belongings of ours, and my fiance had videotaped every room of the home. The home was just so extraordinary to us, like something we had never seen before. As of this date, we still hold in possession the tape which had been recorded of that home. One of the bedrooms had been painted with artwork from a very artistic person. That artwork is believed to have been finger painted and very unusual. At the time I looked at the house before we had all moved in, I went to that room with the painting many times. I knelt down on my knees in front of the painting and touched it with my hands to get a full feel of its characterization. I will say, to this date, that the painting that was on the wall that very moment had changed once we had moved into the home. First, it was a painting of a turkey, very unusual. There were many things in this house that were strange, only we didn't catch the unusual things about them until we had moved in. To this date, I only hope to find who had lived here before we had, and I will, in time, find my answers. Now you will know the beginning of this unusual experience. It started with that painting. After we had moved into the home, we began to refresh our minds a little bit of what we thought was strange. I was in the process of unpacking and settling into our new home. I went back into that room with the painting and was in shock from what I had seen. That painting was a woman, and there was writing above the painting of that woman, and it said Earth, hate her, everything. The painting of the woman was on the wall, right on the outlet corner where a television had been sitting. I will explain to you what description I'd seen in that painting. It was a woman whose face was intensely beaten with blood flowing from her hair down through her face, and then to her arms. Her hair was hung up, as if she had been in an electric shock. Her face was bruised badly, and cut up with scars on the side of her face. Her eyes were open, and the smile on her face was extremely intense, as if she was angry. I looked around the room more thoroughly, and there on the other side of the wall were more paintings. One was of a butterfly, and a mushroom was the other. On the closet door was a poem written by the famous poet, Keats. I believe to this date, the same person who had written the poem on the door had to have been the same person who did the painting on the wall. I looked around the room closer and came upon some blood on the floor on the side of the room. It was not fresh blood, because it looked like it had dried up and had been there for a long while. I closed the door behind me and left the room. I didn't go back to the room until later on through the next week. One of the rooms upstairs was right next to that room that we had turned into an office. Across the room was the bathroom. On the other side was another room we used for our bedroom. Of course, there was an attic, located right across from the room with the painting. On the door that leads to the attic is a sign that says private. I always wondered who slept up there in that attic. In the attic, there were beds, 2 of them. The beds were built into the floor and the walls. Underneath the boards of the beds were pipes. I won't say what kind of pipes, because I'm not sure. My only guess is that they are water pipes. The attic was made to be one of the 5 bedrooms in the entire house. This room, however, was among the most strangest thing I'd ever seen, the exception with the room being the painting. In this room, the attic was cross spaces large enough to fit almost 10 or more bodies depending on the size. In one of the cross spaces was another painting. This painting was put together with boards. It was handmade, and the colors of the painting were the exact same colors used in the painting of the other room. It seemed to be the painting of the devil. However, it was never confirmed of what the painting really was. There was a sofa left in the room with strands of brown hair, which seemed to be the color of my own hair, and I never even sat on the couch when we found it there, let alone had it belonged to me. Along with the sofa, there had been a brown recliner chair sitting next to the sofa. Underneath the recliner there had been a huge blood stain. In turn could have passed to be a huge stain of grease. The attic could have been turned into at least 2 rooms by the size of the cross spaces, and that's an example of how big they were. When I left the room of the attic to go back downstairs, I noticed as I walked down the stairs, there had been names engraved into the carpet of each step that I walked down. I could not make out the names, but it was indeed visible to the eye. It was very strange to me. I wanted to find out some information about the house because I began to get nervous and anxious of the situation. I turned to our next door neighbor for info and hoped to find out all I could. One side of the house was cut off by a wall where the next door neighbor had lived. It was indeed unfortunate to us because that wall was separated from the neighbor and had not been closed off to him, as he had all entrances into our part of the house. No door on our side had locks to keep him coming through our side of the home. This made me very nervous, especially throughout the night. With an exact total of 4 rooms upstairs and the bathroom, and only 1 bedroom downstairs. We had turned that room on the bottom level downstairs into my son's room. It was not safe enough to put my son upstairs due to the stairwell, and the fact that I was afraid that he would get hurt. Therefore, the only room downstairs we had used for his room, just outside of my son's bedroom, was the basement door, and another door that led to the next door neighbor's bathroom. We were told that the door that led to the neighbor's bathroom had not been used because the bathroom toilet was broken. To this date, I don't believe that theory which had been said to us. I noticed on the side where my son's bedroom was, each door had locks on them at the top, which made me nervous because I was concerned that someone could get locked in and would not be able to get out. However, the only door without a lock was the bathroom door to the neighbor's side of the home. That seemed a bit unusual to me, as if it was purposely set up that way, so that the next door neighbors could have entrance into our side of the home whenever he wanted to come on our side. Another entrance that our next door neighbor had to our side of the house was in the kitchen right where the pantry closet is. In the process of unpacking, I had sat some pictures against the door until I got around to hang them up. Other entrances the neighbor had to our side of the home were upstairs and in the basement. There was a storage place located right between the office and the bathroom, which had 2 doors inside the storage space that the next door neighbor could use on our side of the home. On our side of the storage space were locks. Therefore, we were fortunate for the matter. The doors to the storage space were made of glass, and therefore, it would have to take someone to break the glass or professionally remove the glass in order to enter on our side. As for the basement, the neighbor would have to break the chain on our side to come up the stairs on our side. Anyway, after having suspicions of what may have happened in this home, or what could have happened, I had to talk to someone and find out something. That's when I started questioning the next door neighbor. One day, I ran into our neighbor outside, not literally, and asked him about the painting that was on the wall. I asked him if he had known of the tenants who used to live in the home before us, and possibly all he could tell me about the painting and who stayed in the home where the painting was. The neighbor claims that a girl by the name Anna stayed in that room at one time, and told me that she was the one who did the painting. At that very moment, I felt that there was more that he had known, that I need to know now. With having a few supernatural experiences previously, the feeling that someone would lead me to some kind of answer clung to me, to ask him more about what he could tell me. He told me that Anna was about the same age as me, and knew that she had been involved in many serious circumstances with others dealing with gothic rituals, practicing witchcraft, and had camped out with others in the back of the house at a campsite where most of the rituals are being performed. He offered to take me back to the campsite one day, although I never was able to get around to it. Thereafter, I insisted on letting him take a look at the painting himself, as well as the poem from Keats that was written on the door in the room. We also went to the attic to look at the stain that was on the floor. He could not agree with me that it looked like anything like a blood stain. I showed him the names engraved into the carpet on the stairs to the attic. He couldn't make a vision of what I had been seeing. Therefore, he wasn't able to discuss that matter with me. As far as the blood in the room on the floor of the room with the painting, he did in fact agree with me that it appeared to be bloodstains. However, he could not give me any explanation of why or how it got in there. The neighbor explained that he rarely paid any attention to anything in the home, and hadn't been in the home but a few times to do some work to it. I didn't agree with that theory at all. I knew there had to be a lot of info missing that he wouldn't tell me then. The neighbor insisted on finding someone to come look at the painting. I told him that it would be a good idea for someone to come out to take a look at everything I'd seen, and to examine the home in case there was any signs of supernatural crisis. When the neighbor left, I assumed that what he intended to do was not going to happen, only because I felt that he knew more than he was willing to tell me at that time. I left the matter alone long enough for me to stumble across anything else that seemed unusual to me. The day after, my fiancé and I, along with our son, left the home to take care of some business, and when we had returned to the home that evening, we saw the neighbor coming out of our house with a cooking pot. It was quite unusual to us, knowing that the home had been locked up, and could not understand how he had gotten into the home without having a key. My fiancé and I got out of the car, and the neighbor walked over to us, explaining that he went into the house. He told us that we made him quite nervous about the discussion with the painting as well as everything else we talked about. Therefore, he decided to speak with his cousin on how to bless the home. The neighbor explained that he blessed the entire home using some ancient herbs that were given to him, and told us that he was trying to help us out because he felt that it would resolve the situation. After his explanation, he continuously explained that he would not go back into the home without us knowing about it first. We left this incident alone, being as it was a first-time offense, and he said he was trying to help. When we walked into the home after speaking with him, we could smell the scent of the herbs he used all through the home. It was a very strong and painful scent, almost as if it was the smell of marijuana. The smell was in a long stretch throughout the home. I was more concerned for my son. We had to leave the house for a few hours more in order to escape the smell and painful irritation of our eyes. Finally, once we returned to the home, the smell settled and we could breathe again. I wasn't actually pleased for the matter that he had came into the home uninvited and blessed the home with no knowledge of what he was doing. Still, I left the matter alone, believing that he would not do it again. In order to concentrate on other things, I used my time trying to unpack my things and cleaning one room to the next. It wasn't until the next few days later I had an incident of my own. It was in the middle of the night. We were all asleep, and I was awakened by a man who laid there on top of me with all his weight pushing on me so tight that I couldn't breathe. I thought I'd been having a nightmare, although my eyes were open, and the force I'd been using to fight and pull to escape this man's weight and the fear he had been pouring over me was only a nightmare in my life. In reality, I looked beside me as I laid there fighting to escape the fear amongst the man's desire to hurt me, trying to wake my fiancée from a sleep to save me. My fiancée laid there in a deep sleep as I could not hear a peep from my crying screams of what I had left to breathe. I had been played with that very night, if you know what I mean, laying there in my own head with my fiancé laying right next to me. With one heroic scream, I used all my weight to escape this man's arms and pushed him off of me. Frightening, all I could see was his brown hair and his back that turned to my face as he walked away with not even 2 seconds and disappeared. I sat up in my bed next to my fiancé, waiting there, holding my body, hoping he would be awake and hold me. I could not make sense of this, not then and not now. Even after, I knew it wasn't over. I couldn't even call the police because, let's face it, I wouldn't be able to explain to them of such an incident. Even so, they wouldn't be able to believe me. Amongst other things, they would turn it on my fiancé, and I would not take that route. Not then, and not now. After my fiancé had awakened, I told him about what happened. He just held me tight, and he was worried. I'm thankful he believed me. After a while, I was too angry to sit there and do nothing. I was determined to get my answers. Even then, why me? I know I'm not the only person in the entire world who has had this exact same incident. There are others. I know, because I've read about them. I know that there are others out there who have been hurt multiple times in incidents like this. I've now moved out of that home and only live 2 minutes away from there. I've not been back since we moved. There are others who I'm aware who live in that same house right now as I'm telling you this. 4 of them I am aware of are girls. I fear for them. I worry for them. Even though this isn't the only incident that happened to me in that same home, they live in there as I speak. As there have been many incidents, not so much severe to this one, I worry for anyone who lives there. This will come back to me one day. In some form, some way, it will find me, and I will find my answers. I've had the experience of the supernatural ever since I was a young child, around the age of 7 years old. It has followed me. I'm 22 now. This house I lived in Buma Point, New York was said to be over 100 years old. The supernatural experiences I've had are real. It may be some kind of gift that I've been given, but it's frightening at the same time. I only seek to understand it. Even so, it's frightening to know the answers I'm looking for. I can only do what I can to accept this the best way I find reasonable. I will tell you that the man who messed with me that night is in no way comparison to any person I've ever met or come across my entire life. This will be one of the many experiences I will never forget. I know that there are others out there who wonder just the same as I do. Why me? Is there ever really an answer to that question? And if you ever wonder whatever happened to the painting or the handmade artwork that was found in those rooms, I won't be able to explain that to you. All I can tell you is that the neighbor that lived next door to me went into the house without telling us, carved that painting off the wall, literally, and told me that he burned it. As far as the handmade artwork made out of boards, I won't ever know. The neighbor took that too. To this date, that painting exists, as well as the handmade artwork made of boards. Everything in this house exists to me, and as far as the girl I was told that did the painting on the wall, Anna, what does she know? Where is she today? My last question in regards to the landlord, John. Do you always allow your son to go into the home whenever he wants to, especially when other tenants are renting the home from you? Trust me, one day it could end up being a big mistake for him. My guess is there something to hide? I live in Arlington, Washington. When I moved into my house, the forks started bending. Now when I'm there by myself, I can hear people walking upstairs. When I'm upstairs trying to sleep, I can hear people or things running up and down the stairs. If I get up and look down the stairs, I can't see anything, but I can still hear it. Soon after we started moving into this home, our pets started disappearing. One of our cats came back, covered in what looked like blood. He was gone about an hour after he came back. All of our pets were inside pets. My aunt saw a little girl in my yard, and in the house with blonde hair. Nobody I live with or live near has even blonde hair. When my mom lived with me, she saw her too. My sister loved to listen to her stereo, but then the stations started changing by themselves. We could actually watch the bar move back and forth across it. Recently, my dad's stereo started doing that too. I got an iZone sticky film camera for my birthday one year. I took a picture, and there was an orb in the corner of it. When I'm home alone, it can totally be silent. I'll be reading a book, and my dog will start barking. I can get her to calm down, but as soon as I sit down again, she starts barking again. My cousin and I got really big chills right before we hear any of the noises upstairs. We look at our attic doors, but every morning the lock is unlocked and sometimes on the ground. Sometimes at night, I can even hear faint talking. I had a friend stay with me once, and she tried to get out of bed, but she said she felt something heavy on her. There was nothing that I could see on her. My dad went into the kitchen in the middle of the night to get a glass of water, and the freezer was wide open. This all started in '88. My aunt even had someone come and bless the home. I guess it didn't work, because it is still happening. My name is Eric, and I have a couple of occurrences that are rather interesting. Nothing amazing, but definitely weird. I've always been interested by dark things. Like to dress in black, and I like to listen to extreme metal and such things like that, so I've always kept an open mind on such things. Well, anyways, when I was about 6 years old, me and some of my brothers slept in the floor of the living room for about a couple of years. Well, one night, I awoke for no real reason, I guess. I was still tired, so I didn't want to get up or open my eyes when I felt something unexplainable. It was the feeling that someone was near me, that wanted to hurt me. I can't explain it. I just felt that. Well, being curious, I opened my eyes and I saw an older woman crouching down next to me, and her face was right in front of mine, as if looking right at me. I closed my eyes again in sheer terror, but I was still curious to see if it was still there. So I looked, and the woman's face was still there. I didn't actually see her body. I just assumed she had a body or something. I closed and opened my eyes several times, and she was still there. I was more scared than heck, but somehow I went back to sleep. It never happened again, and I never told anybody because I really thought it could have been my imagination. But I know what I felt, and I'll never forget that terrible feeling I got. Another interesting experience I had was the same year, a few months later. I woke up for no real reason, and when I opened my eyes, I saw an older looking woman standing on the base of my brother's feet that slept next to me. I didn't close my eyes because I wanted to see if it was real. At one moment, I felt that same threatening feeling, but not for myself. But I actually feared the well-being of my brother. I went to sleep again, and it never happened again after. I never told anybody for the same reason as last time, because I'm skeptical. So it could have been either a real apparition or just my stupid imagination. I guess I'll never know.
Ever since I was a little girl, I've seen things or felt things. I haven't decided if I follow the feelings and spirits or if they follow me. When I was 7, I lived in a huge farmhouse. I was awakened one night by a cold feeling on my cheek, almost like someone was placing their hand and just brushing it against my cheek. I sat up in bed and looked around, expecting it to be my sister trying to wake me up. Instead, I was greeted with an empty room. I tried to fall asleep all night and couldn't. For weeks, I refused to sleep on my own room and stayed with my parents. About a month later, I was back to sleeping in my room and was awakened again, but this time by the closing of the side door downstairs. I thought it was my father coming home late, so I walked into the hallway. What greeted me on the stairs still scares the daylights out of me today. When I got to the stairs, a lady that I had never seen before was walking up the stairs, or so I thought. But when I looked closer, I realized that the woman was floating up the stairs. She wore a dark brown skirt and a white blouse covered by a jacket. The white blouse had been stained and red in a few places. When I squinted my eyes to try and get a better look at the blurred image, I saw that the woman's face was battered and covered in blood. I was frozen in my tracks and unable to move. I just stood there. She didn't appear for too long until she ultimately faded away, but I'm convinced that the presence was a former owner of the farmhouse I used to live in. In my last antidote, I introduce you to my mother's family, the Sorensens, who lived in East London, South Africa, during the first half of the century. In fact, most of the family members remaining alive at this time are still living in East London, although a few have also moved to other cities in the country. Families were, in those days, much larger than they are nowadays, and my mother's family, which had 12 children, was not unusual. This story concerns one of my mother's brothers, Nigel, who was, for some reason, nicknamed Boy. I've always known this story for as long as I can remember, but 2 weeks ago, I formally interviewed my mother. Before I start the story proper, let me give you just a little background on my family. My maternal grandmother's name was Mina, but I was, however, never fortunate enough to meet her, as she died some years before I was born. She and my maternal grandfather, Chris, did, however, instill in all their sons and daughters a deep and abiding belief of all things spiritual and religious, and the whole family were staunch Catholics. My mother and her brothers and sisters believe in ghosts and spirits, and, in my mother's own words, firmly believe that spirits of those people that we are close to in life remain close to us after their deaths. It was not uncommon, in the days of the beginning of this century, for an above-average number of babies to die when very young. In my mother's family, however, only the firstborn, a boy called Ivan, died in early childhood, and the remaining 11 were all healthy and thrived, until 1944, that is. My uncle Boy, who was 30 years old at the time, came on one night after having a few beers, and, as he did not want his mother to smell the alcohol on his breath, he decided to spend what remained of the night in his car that was parked outside their family house in Park Street. He did not have a peaceful night, however, as he was unfortunately brutally attacked and robbed. His attacker had on a pair of army boots and forcefully kicked my uncle on the head, so forcefully in fact that the boy later contracted and died from inflammation of the brain. He died in a hospital on July 2nd, 1944, and was buried by the family near the end of the month. The entire family was devastated, as he had been much loved. He had been the joker of the family, and always used to perform practical jokes on my mother and her older sisters, dressing up as Dracula and jumping out to frighten them and so on. He apparently had a very loving nature and a great sense of family, but had never married. On the day of the funeral, my grandmother, my mother and her sisters Lily, Janetta, and Edna locked up the house in Park Street and prepared to walk to the church, which was just down the street. They had recently received a large arrangement of St. Joseph lilies from a family friend, in sympathy for Boy's death, and the flowers had been placed in a vase in the dining room before the ladies had left for church. No one was left in the house, and, furthermore, no one, other than my grandmother, had keys to the house. After the service was finished, they walked back to their house, and my grandmother unlocked the front door. The dogs were very excited to see them, most probably wanting company after having been left alone for so long. My mother, being the youngest, rushed past the others and into the dining room. She stopped dead in the dining room doorway and turned around. That's when she noticed the apparition of Boy standing right there. He had a completely blank expression and simply just pointed in the corner of the dining room. That's when my mother looked to see what he was pointing at and was horrified. She saw what appeared to be a dark figure with robes on and a hood sitting on a rocking chair. A second later, Boy disappeared, and so did the mysterious hooded figure. The most interesting part of this whole story is my mom told me that the chair was still rocking by itself moments after the hooded figure disappeared. I know this all sounds a little hard to believe, but believe me, this was a real occurrence. Believe it or not, ghosts and spirits do exist. You just have to be open to seeing them. Oh, and by the way, those lilies that you saw earlier in the story, the ones I mentioned, yes, they were face down where the apparitions were, 2 of them. I worked in a movie theater that used to be a theater before, but not movie, but stage. As a matter of fact, the stage is still there, complete with all the vents, dressing rooms, and the overhead mechanisms to control curtains. It was a very happening place during its time. There was a dining place called the Kit Kat next door to the theater, and a hotel on the other side. When the stage was closed, The place became a movie theater with one screen. It is still set up as a theater would have been in the area of segregation. It became a 2-screen movie theater recently, and the balcony has been closed off. There have been some pretty weird things going on upstairs. I was talking to the manager one night about something that happened as I was leaving pretty late. It sounded like something upstairs in the old lobby fell. Something big. I went up with a friend to check it out, but nothing could have fallen. After I'd gotten about half of my story out, the manager finished the story for me. He said that he experienced the same thing. We've both heard voices upstairs and footsteps on carpeted floors. No one ever really experienced anything, or they don't talk about it. Up until a few months ago, no one ever saw anybody. Well, that all stopped pretty recently. I've seen 2 men. I'm the only one who has seen anything. One of them was a shadow person. He was a very dark presence, so dark in fact that he almost appeared to be a cloud floating around the room. In fact, that's what he had been doing when I saw him. By the way, you could still make out the outline of this figure. He was also wearing a top hat. The presence that I saw was upstairs in the balcony. The feeling I got off of him ranks up there with the feeling I got the one time I encountered the shadow person. This guy, however, looked like he was some sort of construction worker. The manager, which is my uncle, has been doing a little bit of research and has come up with very little information. I've written a narrative about the man upstairs. My fiance drew a picture of him without my knowledge, just from the description I had given him. I saw the picture one day in the backseat of his car, and it sent chills through my body. The city is wanting to tear down this building and put an even larger theater in its place. We do not know how long the owner of the building is going to hold out on selling it. Hi, I'm not sure if this is a ghost story, or just me being nervous because of old fables, but I'll share it with you anyway, and I'm anxious to hear what you think. First of all, I'm from South Louisiana, where ghosts, voodoo, and haunted antebellum homes are a way of life, or at least a big part of the history down there. About 3 miles from my parents' home, where I grew up, there's an old plantation house, which I believe was built in the 1800s. I know that I'm going to skip around because I feel like I have to explain everything, but please bear with me. While I was growing up, I always felt scared to be outside or even alone in my parents' house, but I don't think the house itself was haunted, but maybe the area, because it was so close to this old house. I actually never even noticed the house until like only 6 or 7 years ago, when someone finally bought it and decided to refurbish it. The house was once known as the Stephanie Plantation, then as the Halfin House, and I believe that there was also one more name for it, but I can't think of it right now. The new owner put a lot of effort into doing research into the history of the house and how it looked. You know, pretty much to find out anything and everything about it. First of all, he was a friend of my father, so we got to see the house through many stages of its rebirth. The new owner took before and after photos of the house. The before photos really scared me. There were, I believe, 5 faces or bodies of ghosts in the pictures, but they were very clear. One looked like a man, maybe with a beard and very proper demeanor. Another was a lady in the ball gown. That was what the silhouette looked like, and possibly a crown. Another looked like a small child looking out of the window, and another just a blur. One looked like a man screaming, and it seemed to have chains on his wrists. I don't know what exactly to say about these pictures, but I know what I saw, and I know how the house felt, and I believe them. I've always felt a type of sixth sense, if you want to call it that. My dreams often come true. ESP is a frequent thing for me, and I always get these feelings. I'm not trying to say I'm psychic, because I'm not sure exactly what this is, but I have come to try to use them more and more. Anyway, the house was very cold, even though it was the dead of summer, probably 100 degrees and humid. You know, the typical South. Anyway, it had this very eerie and unwelcoming and not very peaceful feeling to it. And as weird as it may seem, I kept getting like these glimpses or flashbacks that were very dark, but they were of this house. The new owner had tons of stories of hauntings by him and previous visitors, or just stories that were documented. I talked to this friend of my mother-in-law who is really into this stuff, and she seems to think that for some reason I have a connection with this house, that it isn't just me being a channel. I don't know what to think. I don't really want to know. Every time I visited this house, I would get the creeps, and always in the same places. There was a small closet-looking space at the top, 3rd floor, which was recorded to have been used as an infirmary in the war. I was standing near it, thinking. I was getting a funny feeling about it, and didn't notice my brother behind me. As a joke, he picked me up and pushed me inside of it, and I'll never forget the black flash, if that makes sense, that came to me. I'm not sure if I actually saw it, or just remembered it, but it was one of the single most frightening events to date. It was like I could hear, just for that brief second, screaming and cries, and see so many people in that small space. I don't know, I guess I can't really explain it. Anyway, the room that was supposed to be the infirmary still has bloodstains on the floor, even though the original boards have been removed and replaced. I truly think something more happened up there. So then all of a sudden, this guy and his wife up and sold the house to my father's cousin, Curtis. He got a grant from the state to do further research on the house, and he actually tracked down many original pieces from the house. In the meantime of all of this, I get engaged, and one day, I woke up and something told me that I should have my wedding pictures taken in the old Halfin house. So I called him up and asked if that would be okay. He was reluctant because he really didn't want any more pictures taken and of the house, but finally agreed. So I went back because I was so totally drawn to this house. Since Curtis has been restoring this house, there's a much more peaceful air in it, really. And anyway, as I was walking around, I prepared myself to be more open to anything. I walked in the ballroom and got this very clear vision of this lady with a beautiful gown and crown on, maybe the lady in the picture. And even though I already had my wedding dress picked out, I immediately went home and asked my mother to make the dress exactly as I told her, and she did, though she found it was very hard to understand me sometimes. Anyway, the dress turned out beautiful and exactly as I had envisioned it. And of course, I topped it off with a small crown. I went and took the pictures, and when I walked out of the room, dressed that way, I felt the most wonderful, peaceful, and almost happy vibe rush in and out of me. It was like just me looking that way brought peace to the house. The pictures went well, but there are a couple questionable ones, which I want to send to you, to examine when I received them back from my mother. They were taken on a dead tree, but where we believe someone, or more than one, was hung to death. In the tops of the trees there is a mist. I thought it was the sun, but some say no. I would just like to see what you think. Anyway, to thank Curtis, I sent him a blow-up picture of the entire exterior of the house, with me standing on the balcony of the master room. He later came to tell my father that he can't explain it, but since that day, there has been a great peaceful feeling in the house. I'm anxious to hear what you think, and then again about the pictures. I hope I have not wasted too much of your time. Thank you. I've had several ghost experiences, but the one I'm writing happened when I was about 16. We lived in a very rural area, in a big tri-level house. The bedrooms and a bathroom were on the top floor, a small bedroom, a bathroom, the kitchen, and a huge living and dining room were on the second, and the bottom floor was a 2-door garage. The master bedroom on the top floor had once its own deck, and still had the sliding door, which now leads to a 16-foot drop to the backyard. It is important to know this, because we often would hear someone knocking on that door, even when we had the blinds open, and could see there wasn't anyone there. The stairs from the second floor to the third went straight halfway to a landing, then turned right, and went up the rest of the way. On the landing on your left, if you were going upstairs, was a picture window. I was standing at the top of the stairs one afternoon, calling my 2 younger brothers. The youngest, Lee, came to the bottom of the stairs and asked what I wanted. He and Chris were getting a snack. I was going to answer him when I felt a hard shove against my shoulders. I fell down the stairs to the landing. My brother raced up the stairs to the landing, calling our other brother. I stood up with Lee's help. Since I was okay, I shrugged it off as an accident and forgot. Weeks later, my brother was in the house by himself. He was coming downstairs. I could see him through the window, and he tumbled down the stairs to the landing. He swore someone pushed him, but he and I were the only ones home, and he had been the only one inside. The next day, stupid kids that we were, we decided to test it. Lee stood at the bottom of the stairs, Chris stood outside and watched through the window, and I, really stupid, okay, stood at the top. I felt something push me, and I started to fall again. I caught myself on the rail and was standing. Something I couldn't see was trying to pull my hands off the rail. I got up and ran down the stairs in record time. Chris said he couldn't see anything, but Lee swore he saw a shadow chase me from the landing down to the second floor. After that, none of us would go down the stairs alone, and we always ran. For some reason, they wouldn't tell our parents decided to move. Only 6 months after we started living in the house.
You know the drill. Please like, please share this video, and subscribe if you're new. Comments help as well, and it all helps for the algorithm. Love you guys.